I'm almost ready to cut this boat in half, which will be the next episode. Prior to putting the forward deck assembly into here, which I will do after it's cut in half, there's a few small items that need to be tended to that'll be on the inside here. First is the tow tube up front here, the mast tube through the mast partner and step, and the hardware that goes in. So we'll just cover that in this episode, a quick little one. Then next episode we'll be cutting this boat in half. So we want to drill a hole through here for a tow line, and we're just provided with this 3/4 inch outside diameter plastic. So I've marked a couple of lines 1 inch below this join line here on both sides, and then take a square and measure it in the equidistance on both sides. So now we're just going to take a drill, small one to start, drill through here and see how our holes line up. Through one side. And there we go. So now the trick is to drill a larger hole as straight as possible through here. So we've got a 3/4 inch hole drill bit on here, and I'm going to go as slow as possible to get it started. There you have it. So with the mast tube in place, just going to first be injecting some epoxy around the outside, thickened up with silica. This is basically to hold it in place. And then inside will be some fiberglass tape wrapped around it, strengthening it. Alright, the tow tube is through. It's been epoxied from the outside just to hold it in place, and that epoxy is now pretty well set up, so I think I can proceed. It's a bit of a tricky corner to try and wrap some glass around. However, nobody's really going to see it down in there. But to fill the holes or the gaps, mixed up a whole bunch of thickened epoxy here. So what I did was I mixed up a couple of pumps of epoxy and separated it. The majority of it I have kept without any fillers. And then I just used a little bit here to thicken up, which are just going to smear into there in a big blob that won't run. You can see I've also sanded the whole area prior to this, just to make sure. So we've got a blob of thickened epoxy in there. I'll get all of it in there that I have. Then we're going to take these pre-cut pieces of fiberglass and kind of just push them into there, squishing the filler around. So I've got one layer. I'm going to add a little bit of epoxy unthickened here to the glass just to get it wet and stick. Then I have a second layer, slightly larger, slightly wider, to overlap that piece. That may just come up too high. I don't want it showing above the deck, so I'll go about right there. Again, I can just push it into the thickened epoxy, and then we'll saturate both those layers. We'll just let that soak in a bit. May have to take off a little excess as it starts to run down there, but that's going to be mighty strong as a toe line area. Okay, so with the mask tube in place, all epoxied inside and out, just going to use a simple flush cutting saw here to just cut away the overhang of the fiberglass tube. There you have it. Hey, time to put some hardware in. So these unique little turnbuckles will go through the double wall here and hold the two halves together when in the water. So we're just going to check to make sure that there's not any bunches of epoxy or blobs of epoxy inside preventing me from gluing these in. So they all seem to fit very nicely. So we will just take them out and then we'll apply some epoxy and put them in. So first I'm just going to sand a little bit on the inside of the holes here, make sure that we've got a good clean surface for thickened epoxy to adhere to. Okay, so I've cleaned off the surfaces here with a little rag and some acetone. Just in case, we're just going to run a small bead of thickened epoxy. Oops, well that's smaller than that. And then we'll go and stick these in the boat. And we'll repeat the process for the turnbuckle piece. Slide it in, find the threads and just tighten it up. So we got good squeeze out on all sides on all four of them. Time to dry fit the front seat assembly. So I've done a bit of shaving around the edges, fits okay. Some of the cleats need to fit into slots, a little bit of shaving here and there, but the main thing is I need to get the deck into here so that I can mark off where the hole is for the mast partner. So what I'm going to do is just mask off a big area here. I'm not exactly sure where it will be. Some masking tape. And that hole needs to be big enough for my bottom bearing bit to follow. So now I have the deck back in place and I'm just using my laminate trimmer with a bottom bearing flush cutting bit, just following the mast partner inside the boat to replicate the hole in the seat assembly. There you have it. Perfect match hole to the mast partner below. So with the mast tube in, just leveled the boat up. So I've blocked up the stern end of it on my sawhorses dolly so that the level is basically level in the midsection here near the tube. A couple of pumps of epoxy mixed up with some silica. I want it runny enough that it will go into the bottom here and self-level and basically be pouring a block in the bottom here so that the mast is not resting actually on the bottom of the boat panel, but will be resting on a large block of epoxy. And the manual says at about a depth of about 3/16, so I made my trusty little gauge here and we're bang right on. That's going to level itself out. Also going to just dab a little on the inside of the tube here where we've sanded. So I've sanded the top edge of the tube on the outside and the bottom edge of the tube inside and outside, so we have a rough surface for epoxy to bond to. So with that, we can slide it down in to the puddle in the bottom, pressing it down to the bottom of the boat. And then I'm just going to use some wedges here to stick in the top here to hold the tube in the center of the hole. On the top and the bottom. Of course, I don't want these sticks glued in there, but I guess in the worst case scenario, just break them off. And that looks about good. Boat is still level fore and aft, and we're just going to try and eyeball here. Looking pretty good. And while it's held in place in the right position, just using a little bit of leftover thickened epoxy to create a bit of a fillet on the underside surface between the tube and the mast partner. And then as gentle as possible without moving the tube, just run my finger under there, kind of creating a small fillet on the bottom edge. And I think my tube is hard enough in there with thickened epoxy. So what I now need to do is I need to just inject and let soak in around the edges here. We've got these slight little gaps in here. They're designed to accept the epoxy. It's definitely running down into there. And we'll do the same on the bottom level here. Let that sit. I don't see anything running down the tube, which is good, meaning that the little fillet I roughly put on the underside there is preventing anything from flowing out the bottom end. And since I had to shave this earlier, I might as well just use a little bit of the excess epoxy that's sitting on top here and seal the mast partner